Gamers, gals, non-binary pals, you guys saw the ban list and you want to know what's the greatest deck in the room, and we're gonna get cooking. We've got every deck here that I could find on a 5-minute Google search for CYAC Tierlist. We're gonna be taking a fat look at it all. We have best decks in the room. We've got tier 1, we've got tier 2, we've got playable, and we've got don't play. Anything below tier 2, just don't. Kashtira got Diablosis hit, a Rise Heart to 1, and Unicorn to 2. Funnily enough, it still is the best deck. It can still play Shifter, it can still play Droll. The setup board didn't really change. You can no longer do the 9 lock, which is Pog. The deck is just now way more fair, if that makes sense. The deck still kind of does the exact same thing it always has done, but it can no longer do like the one hyper unfair thing that it's always done. I think that it's still definitely an extremely powerful deck. It's still got insane grind potential. It still has insane OTK potential. It has insane top deck, but like everything that Kashtira does is just so disgusting. Gross, gross, gross. Next, Naturia Runic. I'm sorry, this deck is now dog shit. Runic got a hit, well, it got a hit, but it also doesn't help that Sacred Tree got limited, so you can no longer do like Hugin, discard a Sacred Tree. You can no longer do like Camilla loops hyper consistently to just search whatever piece you're missing. This deck went from like playable to like unplayable. Sprite was technically playable, but this deck is no longer playable. Like, this deck has received way too many L's, way too many hits. I'm sorry, but this deck is just not playable in any capacity. Sky Striker. Everybody looked at those Striker unlimits, and we wanna put it here. But I'm sorry, chat, this deck is still horseshit. Sky Striker is literally just Runic. If Runic isn't playable, then Sky Striker ain't playable. Blue Wanderees. This deck, oh my god. This deck is actually goated. This deck is so good right now. This deck no longer has the issue of running into like a hyper degenerate combo setup board that Kashtira and Super Heavy Samurai were able to put up. Now, because it no longer has to deal with the major combo decks of the format that were putting up like a ton of negates and dumb bullshit, finally, this deck is actually like a tier 1 deck. I legitimately believe this. By your advent of adventures now. Reka. As much cope as I see this deck get, I'm sorry, Reka's just not that good. It's definitely playable, but anything that Reka does, just play Labyrinth. Labyrinth does that shit like 100 times better. Live Twin, I'ma say it, deck is poo-poo. Even Live Twin Sprite, like Runic, doesn't do enough. Like, that's how you know the deck is like abysmal. Sword Soul. Sword Soul technically got dang long, but Sword Soul sucks. I'm sorry, the deck that loses to a single Trident is not real. You cannot tell me that Baron Pass is enough. Madolche. I also bought this deck thinking that I could beat tier limit. I was very wrong. Anyways, don't play this deck. Next, Pearly. Unless our Rise Heart gets like hard banned and people are no longer playing kaijus, this deck is just no longer going to be viable. Unfortunately, this deck is still not viable. I don't even think it's that good. I don't even think it was that good in the first place. Like, that shit just lost to a single Daruma cannon. That shit was hilarious. I'm gonna keep it in my area of tier 2. I think that this deck still has a ton of potential, but unfortunately this deck is just, it's just not that good. There are just too many issues with this deck, like having to literally RNG sometimes with Pearly. The fact that like you just got blown out by so many cards, shit like Shifter, stuff like Droll, and you can't even hard counter those anymore by like just being like, oh, I'm gonna play Gamma and go to like the Cell Synchro Baron, because Gamma got put at 1, so it's way more difficult to sack. Mathmech. Before I could put Mathmech in playable. Mathmech was definitely a playable deck. I did not think it was good. I did not think Mathmech was good. I thought it was just a playable deck that you could take to a locals and you can maybe open 3 hand trap circular. But with only 1 circular now, this deck is now fucking dog shit. I'm sorry. It's not like an issue of searching it. It's an issue of having to hard draw it or use a searcher to get to it. Because if you're having to use a searcher to get to circular, you're investing an additional card in your hand that's just opening yourself up to an additional choke point that like circular didn't lose to in the first place. So stuff like Ash Blossom becomes way more impactful versus Mathmech, because you can just Ash the Small World or Ash the Signet Mining. So I'm sorry, but Mathmech circular is in the trash. Despia. John and Yuli coped on this deck more than anyone. Before, I could probably put it at the top of tier 2 as being like maybe the best rogue deck, the best tier 2 deck. Spoiler alerts, now that Branded Expulsion is banned, I'ma say it. This deck is not playable. This deck is like the bottom tier of playable. You cannot play this deck anymore because this deck no longer has like an unfair win condition. And I know like, oh, well, why does the deck that has to have an unfair win condition to be relevant? It's Yu-Gi-Oh! You have to be unfair to win games. And Branded Fusion, summon fucking Mirror Jade pass, or go into like Branded Banishment main deck, I'm sorry. That shit is not cooking. Super Heavy Samurai. This deck got a surprising amount of hits. It got Gambit Limited, it got Cyberstein banned, it got Droll and Lockbird and Shifter still at 3, and one of its toughest matchups, Labyrinth, is completely untouched. I don't know where to put this outside of like tier 2. It's not because like the end board is weaker or whatever. Oh, it also got fucking Scarecrow banned. That shit was kind of relevant. But the main problem with Super Heavy Samurai now is that its main setup combo is so much weaker. It's so much more difficult. There's no more any like one card combos. Like this deck just got way weaker and way more subjective to hand traps. So this deck honestly is now like in the tier 2 category. Before it was definitely like a tier 1, probably the best tier 1, right behind Kashira, but now it's like tied with Pearly. Gold Pride Punk. If you want to lose to Droll and Lockbird, just play just play Pearly, I guess. Labyrinth. I'ma say it, chat. I may be coping. I have a lot of results with Labyrinth. In non-official OTS tournaments, of course. I think that this deck is fucking cooking. I might be on crack. I might be on cocaine. I might be on the strongest drugs ever prescribed to human beings. Hear me out, chat. I think it's the best deck. I think Labyrinth is the best deck. Now, I might be coping, but here's why. Labyrinth has a positive matchup across every single one of the decks. It doesn't have like a bad matchup. If you're losing in the dice roll, sure. But you've got IKEA. You've got main deck Droll. You've got main deck Shifter. You could play those. It's iconic, but you can play those. And this deck's in-engine archetype and ways to search like trap cards all inherently beat these decks. Stuff like Skill Drain. Stuff like Wannabe set goes and match and Skill Drain. Just the Labyrinth IKEA engine just out resource grinds Kashira now. I legitimately think that this deck, outside of getting fucking evenly matched, is pretty good. If you do get evenly matched, sure, like better fucking player. But I mean, like, you just main Solemns now because Wannabe can search Solemn. I legitimately believe that Labyrinth is probably the best deck in the new format until people figure out to main deck evenly matched. In which case, once that shit happens, it's back to being bottom of tier 1. But right now, I'm saying it. I may be on cocaine, but my Labyrinth deck, ooh, this shit gonna be cooking. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on the tier list down below. And yeah, thumbs up.